In the small, seemingly ordinary town of Hawkins, Indiana, where the biggest worries should have been about high school basketball games and weekend diner specials, a storm of supernatural events began to unravel the fabric of reality. At the very center of this storm was a woman named Joyce Byers, a single mother working long hours at a local store, trying her best to raise two boys on her own. When her younger son, Will, vanished without a trace one night in 1983, Joyce's world shattered. What followed was not just a mother's desperate search for her missing child, but a profound and painful case study in how a traumatized woman, speaking a truth too terrifying for others to accept, can be systematically dismissed, disbelieved, and labeled as crazy. This is the story of Joyce Byers, a woman whose so-called madness was, in fact, a fierce and unwavering clairvoyance, a direct line to a horror no one else could see, and how she became a victim of gaslighting long before the word entered our everyday vocabulary. The gaslighting of Joyce Byers began the moment she reported Will missing. To the authorities, represented by Police Chief Jim Hopper, who was drowning in his own grief, and the skeptical deputies, Will's disappearance was initially just another case of a kid running away from home, perhaps overwhelmed by the struggles of a broken family. Joyce was immediately framed as an unstable, over-emotional single mother. Her insistence that something was terribly wrong, that Will would never just run away, was met with patronizing assurances and tired looks. The very foundation of her reality, her knowledge of her own child, was being undermined. This is the essence of gaslighting, a psychological manipulation where a person is made to question their own sanity, memory, or perception. The town of Hawkins, through its officials and even some of its citizens, became the gaslighter, and Joyce, in her raw, untamed grief and fear, was the perfect target. Her emotions were too big, her theories too wild, her behavior too frantic for their comfort. It was easier to believe Joyce was losing her mind than to believe a monster from another dimension had taken her son. The most powerful and iconic evidence of her clairvoyance, and the moment the gaslighting intensified, came with the Christmas lights. Alone in her shaking, freezing house, Joyce began experiencing supernatural phenomena: flickering lights, voices whispering from the walls, strange phone calls. A rational mind, the world insisted, would call an electrician or a psychiatrist. But Joyce's mind was operating on a different frequency, one tuned directly into the upside down where Will was trapped. Her brilliant, intuitive idea to string up alphabet-themed Christmas lights to communicate was the act of a genius, not a lunatic. Yet, when others witnessed it, they saw a woman covering her house in a chaotic web of wires, talking to the walls. To Hopper, when he first saw it, it was a confirmation of her breakdown. To her older son, Jonathan, it was a heartbreaking sign of his mother's collapse under the strain. They urged her to sleep, to eat, to stop, all while Will was using that very system to talk to her. Every plea for her to be reasonable was a brick in the wall they were building around her truth. She was seeing, hearing, and feeling the real, tangible evidence of the paranormal, while everyone around her offered mundane, sane explanations that completely invalidated her experience. Even when allies emerged, the shadow of doubt lingered. Hopper, once the chief gaslighter, began to believe her only when he saw evidence with his own eyes. His journey from skeptic to believer highlights how Joyce's truth required male validation to be taken seriously. Before that, she was just a hysterical woman. Scientists from Hawkins' lab, like Dr. Brenner, represented the ultimate, institutional form of gaslighting. They knew the truth about the upside down and Will's location, yet they deliberately fed lies, calling Joyce's phone calls psychological warfare from the Soviets and framing her experiences as delusions. They had the authority of white coats and government badges, pitting their facts against a mother's feelings. This is gaslighting at its most sinister and powerful. It makes the victim question not just their surroundings, but their own mind against a seemingly insurmountable wall of official, credible opposition. Joyce's triumph was that, in the face of this, she never fully broke. She doubted herself, she screamed in frustration, she cried in exhaustion, but she never stopped following the clues she alone could perceive. The impact of this sustained psychological warfare on Joyce cannot be overstated. We see a woman physically unraveling, she stops sleeping, barely eats, her eyes wide with a manic energy. But this isn't the portrait of insanity, it is the portrait of a warrior operating on pure instinct and maternal love in a war zone no one else acknowledges. Her crazy behavior, buying all the Christmas lights in town, swinging a baseball bat at a wall, screaming at authorities, were all rational, logical actions within the illogical context of her reality. She wasn't disconnected from reality, she was connected to a different, more terrifying one. The tragedy is that her trauma response, her hypervigilance and heightened sensitivity were pathologized. Her greatest strength in finding Will was seen by the world as her greatest weakness. Ultimately, Joyce Byers was proven resoundingly, devastatingly correct. Will was found alive, not because of the cautious, procedural police work, but because his mother refused to stop listening to the lights and the voices. She pulled him back from the upside down with the power of her love and her stubborn refusal to accept the reality everyone else tried to force upon her. Her clairvoyance was real. Her connection to her son transcended dimensions. The gaslighting didn't stop because people suddenly understood, however. It stopped because the physical proof, her son's emaciated body, was now lying in a hospital bed. The relief was mingled with a bit of vindication. She was right, and the cost of being right was almost her sanity and definitely her son's innocence. In the later seasons, we see a changed Joyce. She is no longer the woman who can be easily dismissed. She is battle-hardened, trusted by a small group of people who have seen what she has seen. Yet, the scars of being gaslit are there. She is quicker to anger, more distrustful of authorities, and fiercely protective of her truth. When she senses the mind flayer's return or fears for Will's safety, she doesn't wait for permission or validation, she acts. Her journey from crazy Joyce to the heart and moral compass of the resistance against the upside down is a powerful rebuttal to a society that too often dismisses women's intuition and emotions as hysteria. The story of Joyce Byers, therefore, is far more than a subplot in a sci-fi horror series. It is a mirror held up to our own world. It asks us how often we dismiss people, often women, who are frantic, emotional, or insistent on a truth that contradicts our comfortable view of the world. It challenges us to consider who gets labeled crazy and why. Joyce was never clairvoyant in the magical sense. She was clairvoyant in the way a mother's love can be a compass pointing to her child. And in the way deep trauma can sharpen the senses to danger. She was gaslit by a town, a system, and a set of expectations that demanded she grieve quietly and accept easy lies. But she fought back, not with weapons provided by others, but with strands of Christmas lights, relentless love, and a voice that refused to be silenced. In the end, Joyce Byers teaches us that sometimes, the people called crazy are the only ones sane enough to see the monster in the dark and brave enough to go into the walls to bring their loved ones home.